What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 108 on this Thursday, September 5th, 2024. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Thursday. Didn't have CK last week, so we have a couple of weeks of recruiting catch-up to do. A couple news and notes. Collin's been out getting to high school games. Got the first real visit weekend during the season coming up with the Houston game. So lots of ground to cover with CK, our recruiting expert. And also, of course, we're going to get Collin's thoughts. He's around the team. He's watching. He knows the team as well as anyone as well. His thoughts on the early part of the season, the opener, what he liked, what he didn't like. We'll get into all that on a Thursday here on the Sooners Illustrated Podcast. So, CK, I mentioned, we'll jump right into it. You know, there's been some things the last couple of weeks that we want to catch up on. So we'll kind of run through some quick headline things here. Let's go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off first with Cortez Mills. Obviously, you know, a lot of fans saw he's going to visit Nebraska this weekend. There was some mini panic, if you want to call it that, or like, what does this mean? So I'll ask you, you're here, you know as well as anyone, does it mean anything? Is this a nothing burger? Is this something to be worried about? Tell where you're kind of at with Cortez Mills, the 2025 wide receiver commit, visiting the Huskers this weekend.
Yeah, not to waste anybody's time, I'd take a free ticket to that game this weekend too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd love to go over and I mean, if you have an opportunity to go see Nebraska, Colorado, why not? And look, folks, if you'll remember, in Cortez Mills' commitment story with us at 24/7 Sports, literally in his first ever quotes as an Oklahoma commit,
right?
He talked about how he was basically well aware of the fact that he was probably going to go take a few more trips. And he had talked to him at Jones. He had talked to Brent Venables. He had talked to this Oklahoma staff. And so this has always kind of been something that's on the table. And because of that, really not of much concern. Cortez Mills wants to play for him at Jones. I think that he is very happy with where he's at in his Oklahoma pledge. But at the same time, again, I think he has always kind of had a personal preference of being able to go experience things and get a chance to sort of see the cool stuff that's out there in college football. So, look, I do have a lot of understanding in the no visit policy, but I also think sometimes we feel like that's way too rigid. I think it's sort of a one or the other thing. And we're at the end of the day, we're talking about 16, 17-year-old kids that are going through a once-in-a-lifetime process and opportunity. So not a lot there for me on the Cortez Mills front, and I hope he enjoys it because that's one of the better games this weekend, and Lord knows I'll be watching it too, right there along with him. Just won't have as good of a seat.
You read my mind exactly. One of the worst things that happened, I think, to OU fans and to us, frankly, is that Brent Venables made it sound like very concrete. Once you're committed, you cannot take visits. And so, you know, now the last, you know, going to year 3, it's been pretty much if a guy takes a visit, everyone just assumes, oh, his offer's getting pulled. Oh, he's decommitting. Like it's like you said, it's not that rigid. These guys get permission from the staff or what have you. It's not that cut and dry all the time. So I'm glad you put it that way. We'll keep an eye on it, obviously, but you know, like you said, would you blame anyone for taking that trip to that game this week in Colorado coming into town? So, yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot to panic about here. And so,
yeah, and I want to add quickly too. I think, Josh, the other important context to add in kind of this bigger picture discussion in terms of like the no visit policy. You know, a lot of Oklahoma's commits this past cycle did end up making it to other campuses. Now, I'm not going to name names because fans are going to go get after them for no reason, but lo and behold, they still ended up on Oklahoma's campus when it was time to sign the dotted line. And folks, being on a campus versus an actual visit are two very different things. You might be tagging along with a buddy of yours who's actually taking the visit himself, or maybe you're going with your 7-on-7 team or your collection of what have you. There are a number of reasons that a player might end up at a particular program's campus for a game day weekend or whatever else. And I feel like, without diving into it too far, this Cortez Mills situation is far more a coincidental or a one-off type of incident rather than what actually has to do with this rule being in place. And because of that, again, it's always important to remember an actual visit versus going on a trip, two very different concepts in college football recruiting.
100%. Elijah Melendez decommitted. So 2025 linebacker from Kissimmee, Florida, announced his decommitment. The days are running together. I think it was that earlier this week or late last week. I can't remember. He's been in the tank for a while. It's a guy we talked about at the time when he committed and things like that. He announced he was reopening his recruitment.
Well, so obviously he's been a staff favorite for Oklahoma, but he had been committed to Miami for a very long time. And Oklahoma has been trying to put together a flip effort here for quite a while. That being said, kind of in contrast to the Cortez Mills situation, you actually have reason for concern. Let's say Miami, for instance, if a player decommits and then immediately takes a visit. And that's kind of what happened here. So Elijah Melendez decommits from Miami. He immediately takes a visit to Auburn for the Tigers opener, and crystal ball picks fly in. So Auburn is now considered the favorite. But again, Oklahoma has really wanted to try and get this guy on campus. And whenever he decommitted from Miami, but then all the Auburn crystal balls came in, I think a lot of Oklahoma fans were sitting at home saying, well, is there actually going to be a chance for OU to try and go after one of its top targets at linebacker? And kind of the read of the situation that I got making some calls, and then obviously I put up some notes for our subscribers at Sooners Illustrated. Oklahoma had some pretty productive conversations as early as last week to maybe 2 weeks ago with Elijah Melendez and crew. He was still committed to Miami at the time, but it sounded like OU felt they had potentially at least a chance to host him for a visit. That's kind of where we got to get to here. Melendez, who knows how Miami's going to react in all this? I haven't even really dug into Miami's perception, whether or not the Canes are still going to try and get their guy back into the fold. Auburn is obviously putting on the full court press, and it sounds like that visit went very well for Elijah Melendez. So all you can ask for if you're Oklahoma right now is a chance. Do they get that opportunity? I don't know. I know that, and I've noted this on our board a couple of times, there have been particular dates floated around Elijah Melendez and an Oklahoma game visit as many times as a few times a month over the past couple of months. So this has been in the inner workings for a while. But at the end of the day, you actually have to see it come to fruition. And I think that Oklahoma right now is just kind of crossing its fingers and praying that they get a chance to see Elijah Melendez come to Norman before making any sort of decision that might ultimately favor the Auburn Tigers. So, yeah, man, I think this is a very interesting case study. How quickly does Elijah Melendez choose to make a decision? Is he going to opt for more game visits, or did he see enough at Auburn this past weekend? And again, how does Miami fit into all of this? Are the Canes going to wave the white flag and move on? Or, again, this is a linebacker a lot of staffs really like. Are they going to go and try and get him back in the class? Yeah. Oklahoma loves this recruit, but no matter how much you love a guy, you actually have to see him visit your campus before you really think you have a shot. And so Oklahoma right now, the hope and the goal is to see this guy take another visit to Norman and then ultimately see what happens from there.
For sure. I completely butchered that. My mistake. My brain is
you're good.
Late night last night. He decommitted from Miami. He was an OU target before, decommitted from Miami.
Yeah.
My bad. Completely just misspoke, messed that all up.
But in the same sense,
was not deterred.
No. In the same sentiment, and exactly kind of what you said in the setup, though, is he off the board? Everything that I've heard, Josh, to this point is like Auburn really feels good about the situation and is hoping to see him join their class sooner rather than later. But that being said, as we know, time gone on does not favor the program that currently holds momentum. So Oklahoma is trying to figure out whether or not he is off the board and potentially heading off to Auburn, or whether or not they'll even have a chance. And we're kind of in that gray territory right now.
Right. Apologies again. I'm sure some people were confused. Hopefully they hung with us there. Collin reeled it back in. Let's talk about some of the visits coming up this weekend for the Houston game. So obviously the opener, it was kind of twofold. A, they didn't have any visitors because they weren't allowed to. The mild recruiting violations against DeMarco Murray, he was suspended for the game, all that stuff that everybody knows. But then also the twofold is the fact that it was a Friday night game against Temple. So you probably weren't going to have a big contingent, if any, anyway. And so now you cover this weekend. Houston's coming in. It's a night game under the lights. They're going to wear the throwback uniforms. Guys are going to be coming into town. TK, I guess some names that you're watching in particular here or OU fans should be aware of. I know you're still waiting on the full official finalized list, but we do know some names that are going to be, making their way to town this weekend. So I guess where does your eyes go as far as intrigue for the visits this weekend for, their first real chance to do that for a home game weekend, of the season?
Yeah, our subscribers will have the full list. I'm hoping sometime very soon. Still putting together and getting that list prepared for our readers who have subscribed. If you joined us out there, by the way, during our 75% off window, thanks for hopping aboard. Hopefully we are tailoring to your needs and looking forward to covering this weekend, Josh. Obviously, like you mentioned, the DeMarco Murray stuff, sure. But it's not like they were going to have a lot of people on campus anyway for a Friday night game in week one of the high school football season for Texas and Oklahoma, among a few other states. So we're getting underway, and I'll throw out two names real quick that kind of catch my attention. We'll start in 2026, and I think this is probably the weekend where the fan base really starts to kind of get acclimated to 2026 being the class to talk about, right? Because I'm sure most of the notes and storylines I'll have coming out of the weekend and prior to will have to do with 2026 guys. And one of those names that I'm eyeing is Keenan Harris. 6'1", 195-pound defensive back out of St. Louis, Missouri. Very interesting player here. 22, 23 offers to this point. So a number of programs are already in the mix. You've got a guy out in the St. Louis area, a recruiting hotbed. You probably figure some of the usual figures are going to be involved there. So Mizzou, maybe Arkansas, some SEC programs, maybe some Big Ten presence. But from what I've been able to gather, and I'll expand on this more on the board, this is a prospect that Oklahoma really likes. And to no surprise of anyone, he is a safety with talent and a larger frame. And it sounds like Brandon Hall, JP Lossman, all these guys are going to want to get after him whenever Keenan Harris arrives on campus this weekend. So Alan True, one of our national recruiting analysts and Midwest guy, he reported obviously that Keenan had locked in the visit. Alan and I were keeping tabs with each other just kind of on what we had heard. Now that the visit is finalized, and it sounds like there's a real opportunity here, Josh, for Oklahoma to gain some traction with a safety target in 2026 that the program really likes. So I would say keep an eye on that one. And then let's go to 2027. I know, but hey, this is my job. It's sicko territory over here if you're going to be in world recruiting. So 2027. I think some folks out there have heard me talk about this guy a time or two, but Ethan Feaster out of DeSoto, Texas, more commonly known, I would say, as Booby Feaster, the wide receiver. In the 27 cycle that we've already named the top 10 player in the early rankings of the class. And I'm going to be honest, Josh, this visit kind of surprised me. So Booby, I mean, he's been in the recruiting spotlight since he was in 8th grade. I found out about him when he was in like the 7th grade. And very quickly, whenever these players become known, you kind of get a sense of, all right, they probably like these programs more than others. That's probably going to be the top 2 or 3 favorites for him, just depending on how he's grown up and who he's viewed. And so there were, in the case of Boobie Feaster, there were a few programs that I felt like had more of an opportunity to gain traction with him quickly. I believe he had a visit on the books elsewhere too, and then pivoted late and scheduled this Oklahoma trip for this weekend a little bit later on in the process. So again, I'm not afraid to say it. I was a little bit surprised that he ended up figuring out a way to come to Oklahoma. I thought OU had kind of had to start looking at other 2027 receiver options because, again, I've heard kind of to this point which programs might be towards the top for Boobie. And so,
yeah,
big time visitor. I mean, again, top 10 player in 2027, DeSoto wide receiver. This guy is one of the best in the country. It doesn't really matter what classification you're talking about either. He's an elite talent. And I think, again, this kind of goes to show the muscle that Emmett Jones can flex in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And the other part of this too, man, DeSoto's not always been the easiest program to recruit for Oklahoma. Emmett Jones getting in there and getting an elite wide receiver to change some plans and come see OU for this weekend's game. Very intrigued by what might come out of this. And I know it's 2027, folks, but we're talking about, again, a top 10 player who all of a sudden decided, you know what, I'm going to go check out Norman this weekend. So we'll see how this thing goes.
For sure. No, 100%. And, it really kind of, 2025 has already kind of been, on the tail end of it, but it really, with these guys coming in, it kind of feels like we're really starting to really turn the page onto 2026, like I said, even 2027. I won't lie, the sidelines were noticeably scarce on that Friday night game against Temple. It was like, I can move around so much easier. What's the deal? And we kind of, there's no recruits here. So I don't imagine it'll be quite that way. This weekend will be a lot more packed to the gills, but should be fun. Should be cool. Good game for guys to come out to. As far as some other recruiting stuff, obviously the high school football season has started. You've been getting out to games all the time. You got more games you're coming up to, obviously, tonight and this weekend. Some things that you've picked up the early part of the season. We're just getting going, obviously, but some other recruiting little news and notes for you, from the road, as you say.
Yeah, I hit 4 games last week, so I think I'm still recovering. But saw some really interesting recruits. Got to see some guys that I had really wanted to see. Delvin Cook Jr. at Skyline, Zion Robinson at Mansfield. Those are a pair of 2026 receivers that I'd been wanting to get eyes on for a long time. But in the interest of time, I'm going to talk about 2 things. I had 2 games in one day on Saturday. The first game was between Lancaster and North Crowley. And it was the Jerry Jones Classic, by the way, Josh. So, yes, the boss man himself graced us with his presence because it's not like he has a quarterback contract to get ironed out or anything like that anytime soon.
Got CeeDee Lamb paid.
So, what's that?
Got CeeDee Lamb paid, at least.
Yeah, at least he checked that one off the list. And then I guess that freed him up to throw his own high school classic. But we get to the Jerry Jones Classic, and as Lancaster and North Crowley are taking the field, they're going through warm-ups. I had someone in the press box tap me on the shoulder. They go, "Hey, who's that down there?" And they point down on the field, and of course, it's none other than OU 2025 wide receiver commit Emmanuel Choice. And just kind of smiled and said, "You'll find out." And
you'll see.
4 quarters later, Manny Choice goes for 6 receptions, 126 yards in the contest. And it wasn't just the fact that he racked up just under 130 yards of receiving. It was how he did it that really impressed me, Josh. First and foremost, yes, he's 6'4", 180-something pounds. Looks like $1 million. But as we kind of talked about when he first committed, you turn on the tape and a lot of it was like, I'm 6'4", 180. I'm bigger than you. Deal with it.
Right.
Now in this game, he was lining up in the slot. He was going out wide and catching some balls over the middle and some slant concepts, whatever else. He showed a ton of fluidity in route running. The yards after catch ability blew my mind. And I think what really stood out to me, his hand usage. He's got hands of glue. Like if the ball is thrown to a Manny Choice, he's going to catch it. But the thing that I've always kind of wondered about him is he going to be more of a big-bodied receiver type and strictly that? And in this game, Josh, OU's 2025 receiver commit, easily the biggest of them all, looked like a player 6 foot 170. I mean, what he was doing, he'd catch the ball and his hand usage. Like, one question about his game, press man, how does he take on press man coverage? Elite ability now to get a cornerback off of him and immediately go to create separation. He now knows how to embrace press man and get off of it quickly and kind of put a cornerback in a difficult position. But then also when he caught the ball, he had a play where he catches it in open field, and I think 3 defenders go after him. And he swam the first one, threw the other one, stiff-armed another. It was like you could see the hand-eye coordination, not just with the catch, but what he was doing with his hands to generate yards after it was, I mean, it blew my mind. I have the video of it up on my Twitter account. He played one of the best games, genuinely, I think, of his career. And that's how you want to start a week 1 contest if you're Manny's choice. So I was thoroughly impressed with one of OU's 2025 receiver commits. Again, a loaded class. But then, all right, story time. So we go to Melissa for game 2 on the day. It's the Melissa Cardinals out of the state of Texas versus the Parkview Patriots out of Little Rock, Arkansas. And not only is this a high-profile in-state, out-of-state matchup, because of that, it was, for lack of a better term, a showcase game. I believe it was the Wipeout Kids Cancer Classic. And I want to start by saying that the people at Melissa are incredible. Like, everyone who works a game day there, that staff, they make it an experience that I look forward to and then appreciate every time I'm around the stadium. But because it was this classic game, we were also working with the event staff, and they were awesome. But part of that was at our seats in the press box, we had ballots for game offensive and defensive MVP. And so the event staffer comes down and says, hey, one thing we are going to ask for you guys to do for us is to vote for game MVPs on each side of the ball. We've actually prepared the players an award. I think it was like a branded game ball. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to the third quarter, I think. We're sitting in the press box and the event staffer comes back down and she says, hey, if you guys can go ahead and start trying to identify your offensive and defensive MVPs, we're going to go ahead and start getting the game balls ready for them.
Right.
So we're like, all right, it's me, Mike Roach, and Jordan Scruggs for us at 24/7 Sports, and then the legend, the icon that is Matt Stepp, a Texas high school football, I mean, a mainstay, an institution, if you will, and one of the best from Dave Campbell's Texas football. Shout out to our friends over there. The 4 of us are on our side, and then there's like a host of media people on the other side of the press box. I don't really know. So we're starting to talk, and the first name that we started to bring up was Ja'Cory Smith, the 2026 linebacker at Parkview, has an Oklahoma offer, has Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, whatever else. He had made some pretty good plays in this game, came up and was thumping in the run, flashing the athletic ability. We're all like, man, Ja'Cory's probably our favorite. And as we're writing down the name, Ja'Cory Smith, and I told Ja'Cory this after the game too, as we're writing his name, pen is hitting paper. We look up, and a Marion Robinson has intercepted a pass and is taking it the other way for a pick 6. And Josh, I kid you not, you could hear as a Marion Robinson is crossing the goal line, people in the press box scribbling out the name Ja'Cory Smith on their ballots.
He intercepted the award from him. The pass.
Yeah, he literally took the ball and the game ball away in that moment. And naturally, at the end of the night, we end up naming Amarian Robinson the defensive MVP of the game. He made a couple plays on offense, had a couple of pass breakups, just looked really good overall. And so, yeah, it was really cool to watch Amarian Robinson, OU safety, commit in 2025, kind of do his thing. And not that I played any part in it. I did write his name down, and I did scribble out Ja'Cory Smith's. But, yeah, Amarian was awesome. And so I wanted to note that he is going to be back at Oklahoma very soon. And the last thing I want to mention as far as like notes of the road, Ja'Cory Smith, like I mentioned, he has an Oklahoma offer. This is a player that OU really likes in 2026. He is supposed to be visiting with Amarian Robinson as well very soon. And kind of read that I get is that Oklahoma is in pretty good standing with him so far. Sounds like Oklahoma and Tennessee doing a really good job there. Arkansas, Alabama, Texas A&M, Florida State floating around in the mix as well. I really like Ja'Cory, man. Again, he was this close. He was a pick six away to getting the defensive MVP of the game. Already one of my favorites in 2026, and you can see why a linebacker-centric staff at OU really likes Ja'Cory. Interested to see how that one goes with a lot of powerful brand name programs involved with a guy who has some talent and some connections at Oklahoma specifically. But it was a fun week, and like you mentioned, getting out to a few more games this week.
Yeah, more to come. No, it's CK, for people who aren't aware, I think most everyone is who's tuned in everywhere during football season, million games, and we've only just begun. It just shifted to September. We've only just begun. More to come, though, certainly. And I can see why you probably like going out to Melissa too, because that stadium looks incredible. Every time I see a photo from you or whoever, it looks like a small college stadium.
It's one of the best facilities. It's one of the best facilities I've ever seen. And it was so nice that first week to go to Melissa, to go to Mesquite Memorial, where Mesquite ISD is like overly nice to us media folks. I'm talking like the press box attendants will bring over your canes or your roses to you in your press box seat. And there's a whole cooler behind every press box row full of just every soda you could think of.
I would abuse
to have those types of stops on the agenda week one. We're fired up for week two. We're ready to roll.
I would abuse that. I don't usually go too hard on food at games. I mean, I eat, but the drinks and the soda is where I can really, that's where I do some damage. Before we get you out of here, I do want to get your thoughts on the start of the season. And obviously Collin's, out doing recruiting stuff, and he was covering high school games during OU's game last week, but he was watching. And, while Tom, James, and myself were the ones, traveling around, Collin's dialed in and watching the game and keeps up with the program extremely well, just as good as we do. So I want to get your thoughts on the start of the season as far as the opener, what you thought, maybe some things you're looking forward to seeing as we go along here. But, we haven't talked in a couple of weeks. So just, I guess, where are you kind of at with the current team? And from what you saw in the opener, your concerns, what you liked, just kind of in general, a little temperature check from you on what they got cooking with the current squad.
Yeah, another beautiful layer to week one. I published my snap judgments for the OU game while I was leaving the press box at a high school game. And I was like, we're back. I mean, I mid-season form. But kind of in those snap judgments as I was done watching the Oklahoma game and starting to fire off content on that side of things. Obviously, Josh, Tom, James are going to do the game preview and whatever else. And so much has been talked about already to this point as far as the Temple outcome. But this is all I would say.
Yeah.
And I talked about this in three things I think, three things I know. I know that you cannot judge this team through a long-term lens. Like, this is not the team to be judging right now. So much has yet to be revealed as far as what Oklahoma actually is in 2024 that I think, whether you're talking about the Temple game or whatever this Houston matchup's going to look like.
Yeah.
And Lord knows it's probably going to be another funky win. I would encourage folks to remind yourself this is not the team to view as your end of the year 2024 Oklahoma squad, because Oklahoma's still holding a lot back offensively. They have to, and it's probably more imperative than ever before that that's done. They want to maintain competitive play in the SEC. We've documented well the injuries on the offensive line, in the receiver room. But I also think, too, you're talking about so many different layers, all this context. There's still not only zero chemistry in game being built on the offensive line or whatever, but it's difficult in those first 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what your games look like, to situate yourself as a team and as players trying to time things out together perfectly. When you're rotating as frequently as you have to in quote unquote the preseason, whether that has to do with getting young players snaps or that has to do with the unfortunate predicament you're put in whenever you lose players to injury, right? And so I would again, that's kind of my primary takeaway right now. I cannot reasonably or with accuracy lay judgment on this Oklahoma team right now. And I don't really think fans need to try to either. I don't think there's any sense in stressing about it, because ultimately you're not going to have a true read as to what this team is until we get closer to SEC play, until we get closer to seeing every single player that they feel will be able to be healthy, actually healthy.
Yeah.
And until we see things come together to where they're running a full offensive playbook and they feel comfortable doing so with each other on the field. Oklahoma's ultimately going to show you what it is as a team, but that time has not come yet. And until that time comes, I don't think we need to be making too much over some what should be well expected quote unquote struggles early on in this year.
No, I'm with you, and it's the good and the bad of the runway, as I called it a lot over the course of the offseason. The good is obvious. You know, you get off to a good start theoretically with these non-conference games that they should win, and you get some time for Jackson Arnold to get his feet wet, the offensive line to kind of get their feet wet and get some chemistry together. Those are all the good things. The bad thing, if you want to call it a bad thing, is that, like you just said, we're not going to really know where Oklahoma is relative to the other SEC teams at the top of the conference until we get there, until they're playing Tennessee in a few more weeks. So it's kind of the good and the bad of it. But, you know, I'm with you. You know, I think that it's just kind of the nature of college football. But, you know, we kind of talked about it back with the scrimmages that had some things that people kind of freaked out about. Same kind of deal here with it's one game, you know, and they're getting their guys back. Should have some more healthy bodies coming in for this game this weekend. And we'll get into that on the game preview. But, yeah, I'm with you. Kind of one game at a time.
And one thing I want to say, I know some people might be out there saying, well, if you can talk about the offense that way, why not talk about the defense in a similar manner? Obviously they dominated, but it was Temple and you're still working through rotations, whatever else. And here's what I would say, and I talked about this again in that column. Defense is a massive contrast to offense in that at the end of the day, that side of the ball is height, weight, speed. Do you have the dudes or you don't? Oklahoma quite clearly has the dudes. And I think it speaks a lot that with a new coordinator calling it, that entire unit came onto the field, and within like the first 3 snaps, I'm sitting in a press box hundreds of miles away looking at folks next to me going, these dudes look like they're ready to go. I mean, the confidence was on a different level. And you're not hiding certain plays or the amount of plays like you are on offense. You're not relying on timing or whatever else, chemistry. Sometimes defense is about being really darn good at being an athlete and making a play. And I think Oklahoma showed you, whether it's somehow creating that much pressure on the interior, which just does not happen in football, or forcing the number of turnovers that they did. I was thinking about this the other day, Josh. I'm glad I remember this. This is something I want to talk about on the podcast. I don't know if you saw the clip of Kane Womack at Alabama after their game, but Alabama beat Western Kentucky 63-0 in week 1. And for context, Western Kentucky's not necessarily a scrub team. Their quarterback, TJ Finley, kind of balled out at Texas State before he transferred and joined the Hilltoppers.
Yeah.
And Bama shut him out. What I thought was pretty interesting relative to Oklahoma's situation, and I promise I'll make the connection, is Kane Womack takes the podium. He's Alabama's defensive coordinator, formerly the head coach at South Alabama. So he knows the deal. He knows what you should say and what you shouldn't say. He goes up there and says, I'm going to be honest, I was pretty disappointed in our defensive performance after a 63-0 shutout. And he goes, I felt like we left a lot of opportunities on the table to create more defensive explosives or create turnovers or basically go above and beyond what's being asked of us on the defensive side of the ball. And Josh, the mark of a good defense, no matter who you're playing, is what you do beyond just the simple nature of the game. If you make a tackle or you have a tackle for loss or you get a sack, whatever, like good job. But if you're forcing fumbles and generating turnovers and you're making these hustle plays like the Jaden Jackson play on that screen in the game, that shows you just how darn good of a defense you are. And I think Oklahoma, what it showed, there are a lot of very good defenses out there in college football that did not do the same. And that's why I think one primary takeaway and one thing Oklahoma fans could hang their hat on come out of that Temple contest, that defense is for real. Just how good they're going to be, we got to see them play in the SEC. But again, to go above and beyond and to look the way that it did, that's not nothing in a world that is defensive football. And that's why I think you have to view that in a different light relative to how we're trying to figure out what this offense is in 2024.
100%. No, great thoughts. And it'd be interesting to see how how the narrative changes after the next game. And it continues to swing around 1 week at a time. Yeah. So is the nature of the sport. All right, I think that's it for now. Good to have Collin back on the show. We should be able to settle pretty much into a Monday, Thursday, the rest of the season, pretty much. The Friday game threw everything kind of for a loop, but we're back on Saturdays as it should be the rest of the season. So should be able to continue Monday, Thursday. So we'll have Collin back on Thursday next week to catch up on some more recruiting stuff and anything else going on. And like we've kind of referred to a couple times, we're gonna have the game preview. Remember, that's a new thing this year. We did it for the first time last week, and we're going to do it again. It will be on the YouTube channel and podcast feed tomorrow morning. Tom, James, myself, kind of getting you all ready for Houston, what we're watching for, players to watch, keys to the game, and we'll obviously all give our score predictions, all that good stuff as well on the game preview. So keep an eye out for that. I think that's it for now. CK, enjoy the football, and as you cover more ground. How many more games this week? You said 4 last week. You going 4 again?
No, it's 2, maybe 3, depending on how it's
more manageable.
But yeah, going to see Michael Fasusi tonight. He's not playing, so I think we're going to hang out on the sidelines and watch Louisville. Sean Hutton's going to be playing tonight, and then Friday is Duncanville versus South Oak Cliff. So I don't even have time to talk about the amount of talent that'll be on that game field.
Yeah,
we'll have a lot of that coverage coming up for you at Sooners Illustrated.
Good stuff. And then, of course, obviously, Tom, James, myself will be at the stadium on Saturday as OU hosts Houston. Again, keep an eye out for the game preview tomorrow, Friday. That'll be on the YouTube channel and on the podcast feed, so keep an eye out for that. That's it for now. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway. Thank you so much for watching. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, become a VIP member of Sooners Illustrated, all that good stuff. And we'll see you right back here next time on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.